And good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time you're looking at this video. So you are probably looking at this video because you scanned a card called Termination of Agency, and that's what we're going to be talking about on this video. Um, I always tell when I start talking about agency, and I like to get right to it because you scanned the card to get info and not to hear me talk about different things. So I'm getting right. I'm going to jump right into what termination of agency is. This video is meant to be no longer than 5 minutes, so you can get straight to what you need to learn for the test. This will be on the test. Termination of agency is important. There's a number of ways you can terminate agency, but what I want to start off with is really having you. I'm going to start this off with everything that I talk about in agency. And once you really understand this, then you'll be able to really fully grasp what they're looking for you on the to get out of you on the test. First off, agency is state regulated. Every state has their own law in regards to agency and how it's established. So first thing I want to tell you is check your local state laws in regards to agency. It's controlled by the statute in the state in which you're in. Number two, when you think about agency, there's as an agent, you're really going to have three main types of relationships that you're going to have almost practically every time. First off, the first agency relationship that you're going to establish is going to be with your broker. There's going to be an agreement that's going to be signed when you get your license, and you'll agree to an agency relationship with your broker. You're going to be a subcontractor for your broker, so look that up. That probably will be on the test too, the word subcontractor in your role as an agent working at a brokerage. So that's really the first agency relationship. And the reason why I'm really wanting to focus on relationships is because that's really what agency is. Agency is relationships. What is the relationship that I'm going to have with who I'm getting ready to represent? So, number one, the first agency relationship that you're going to be in is going to be with your broker. Number two, the next type of agency relationship that you may find yourself in is with a seller. All right, you'll have an agency relationship with the seller. Your seller will become your client, your principal when you create an agreement or contract. And that contract is typically a listing agreement. And then the next type of agency that you'll find yourself in as a real estate agent is when you're working with a buyer. All right. And those are typically the three main relationships and agency relationships that you're going to be creating. And there's different types of agency relationships and things like that. But those are the three main relationships as a realtor that 99% of your relationships are going to come either, you're already always going to have a relationship with your broker, number one. Number two, you're either going to be representing a buyer or you're going to be representing the seller. And you're going to be hired to do one specific thing. So the question is okay, we agree to form this union, if you will, where I'm going to represent you and you're going to hire me to do one thing. If I'm working with the seller, you're hiring me to sell your property or your house. And that's my job. That one specific thing is my job is to sell your house. And how do we create that relationship? Again, you create that through a listing agreement. Then number two, the relationship that you have with a buyer, that you're hired to find the buyer a house, and you're going to create that relationship with the buyer broker agreement, and that's what's going to help form that relationship. It should be an exclusive relationship. I wouldn't recommend doing anything else as a realtor out here nowadays. But those are the relationships that you're going to have. You're going to have a relationship with your broker, definitely. You're going to have an agency relationship with a buyer, and you're going to have an agency relationship with the seller. And you're going to be hired to do one specific thing depending on who you're representing in the transaction. So everything's good. You go and you talk to a buyer, they want to hire you as an agent to sell them a house. Great. The next, well, just that's one relationship. Number two, you go talk to a seller. They want to hire you to sell their property. They sign a listing agreement. Great. You just created relationships, but sometimes things go wrong in a relationship. As we know, we deal with relationships, friends, significant others, and things like that. And everything doesn't always go right, and you have to sever that relationship. And in real estate, there's a number of ways to sever that relationship. So I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, so on the screen, we just talked about agency and who the people you are typically going to have agency with. But I just want to briefly go over here. Agency is created through something typically that's written, and that goes to the statute of frauds, which is going to be on another card. Go ahead and scan that card because that will have a video associated with it as well. But agency is created expressly through writing a contract or orally, and it can be created and applied through your actions. So you're definitely going to need to know those three things. But we're talking about not agency creation, we're talking about agency termination. And here are some of the ways that you can terminate agency. Let me zoom in a little bit. And what I would do on this when I'm studying this for the test, I'm going to know the voluntary ways that you can terminate agency, meaning that it was agreeable. Like there wasn't anything that happened that was bad or any type of distress or disagreement. That's voluntary. And then the involuntary ways that you can terminate agency. So when we look at the voluntary ways that we can terminate agency, what does fulfillment mean? If you don't know, take some time in the study, say agency relationship, what does it mean to fulfill an agency relationship? And what that really means is you've done what you've been hired to do. Remember, I told you if you're talking to a buyer, you're talking to a seller, you are hired by the seller to sell the house. Well, if you put it on the market and someone put an offer in on it and it went all the way to closing and it transferred to that new person, then you've done your job as the seller's agent. All right. And if you take a buyer, you see a house, you make an offer on the house, it goes through all the way through closing and it transfers to that new buyer, you've done your job as the buyer's agent. And so you fulfilled your duties as an agent to them, that one specific thing that you're supposed to do. All right, so you can terminate agency relationship by fulfillment. Expiration, that's clear. Most contracts have to have an expiration date. When you sign a buyer broker's agreement, there's going to be a time frame that they're going to ask you how long is this agreement going to be intact. Same thing with the listing agreement. Typically, listing agreements are for 6 months. You might go shorter, you may even go longer, depending on the market. The time on the market, the marketing time for that property, it might be a type of property where it takes over 180 days to sell. Maybe a commercial property, a small income producing property, or something like that, or an odd property. So in that contract, it's going to be expiration date. Hey, we're going to sign this listing agreement for 6 months. After 6 months, it terminates. You didn't do your job by the time that was set in the contract, so it's going to terminate. Same thing with the buyer's broker agreement. There will be a time that is inserted in there in terms of your representation of the buyer. And then mutual agreement, what that means is that, hey, you and the buyer or you and the seller just agree to go separate ways. You say, hey, it may be just a disagreement. It may be there's a better fit for the seller or the buyer in terms of looking for the property. They may not be listening to you as a realtor, and you're getting frustrated in terms of giving them directions and things, and they're not following the guidance that you're giving them, the professional guidance that you're giving them. So those are the voluntary ways. Know the three voluntary ways to terminate agency. This will be on the test. One of these will be on the test in some shape or form. And you got to get this one right because this is a fairly easy section. This is going to be definition driven. But if you understand agency relationships and what it takes to get into a relationship and what your specific job is, then you know how to create agency through express, implied, and also oral or verbal agreements. That can all three of those can create the agency that ultimately will need to be terminated with one of these here. It's going to again be either voluntary or involuntary. Let's talk about some of the involuntary ones. And capacity. Okay, that you're not capable of fulfilling the agreement on either side. So that's an easy one. Abandonment or destruction of property. Clearly, if now when they're talking about abandonment, say for instance, and what I think of it as is the if say for instance, there's a couple of ways, like maybe possibly they're talking about if the governmental agency puts a condemnation status on it, or it could be even possibly one of the parties abandon the agency relationship. Maybe the buyer isn't responding, maybe the seller isn't responding, and so you can't get into contact with those people, and perhaps they are not responding to you, and you may have to abandon the agreement based on that. But concentrate on really concentrate on abandonment. That I haven't seen a question come across any practice test or anything else, but they will ask you probably a question about a property being destroyed, and does a destruction of a property sever the agency relationship? And as you can see here, it does. If the property is destroyed, then there's nothing to do a job on. All right, like you were hired by the seller to sell the house, but it's destroyed now. So your job is over due to that, and that's an involuntary action that will cause the agency relationship to be terminated. Renunciation. Okay, I'm done. I just renounced my association with this agreement, and I'm not going to go further with this whole relationship. One side renounces their role in the relationship. Breach. You agree when you establish a contract or an agreement, there are certain terms and clauses that you agree to, and they may be time sensitive clauses, they may be just things that you promised to do either side and you didn't do them. It's clearly outlined in the contract that you were going to spend X amount of dollars marketing the property. The seller may want to terminate the agreement if they find that you're not spending those monies that you promised when you got the listing. So that may be a reason why. And if it's in a contract, then you breach the agreement, and so that's the breach is one that is an involuntary termination, and there's a number of ways that breaches can come up depending on if there's clauses in the contract. If those clauses aren't abided by, then that could be considered a breach of contract. Bankruptcy, I think we all know what that is. If there's a bankruptcy due to your broker, not you as the agent, that's another thing that they're going to try to test you on. If you go bankrupt, then that listing or that buyer, that the contract that you signed with the buyer, perhaps don't doesn't necessarily. Or remember, you're working on behalf of the broker. If you go bankrupt, then it's the broker that owns that listing. Remember that the broker owns that listing. You are an agent of the broker. All right. If you go bankrupt, then it doesn't terminate the agency relationship. However, if the seller or the buyer is in bankruptcy, or the broker is in bankruptcy, that will terminate the agency relationship. And then clearly, revocation of license is going to terminate the agency relationship. If the broker loses their license, then they can't sell property, and that's going to terminate the agency relationship. So if I was studying this, I would definitely know all of the voluntary ways that agency relationship is terminated. And then I definitely would know of the involuntary ones: breach, destruction of property, and probably the bankruptcy one. But just, create a note card, put termination of agency on there, voluntary ways to terminate agency, involuntary ways to terminate agency, and you should be okay in understanding the what is it, 9 things that can terminate agency for the good or the bad. This will end this video. I thank you for watching it. This is Agent Success Training. My name's Hans Smith, and y'all have a good evening, night, day. Take it easy.